Welcome to the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and I'm an artist and an entrepreneur. And yes, those two things can go together. This podcast is for the artists, the creatives, and the makers who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 23 of the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast. I'm your host, Melissa, and I am here with my August co-host, Heather Travis. Hello, Heather.
Hello, Melissa.
And today we are going to be talking about tips and situations where you may have to negotiate as a creative. And if you are thinking to yourself, I don't negotiate, don't tune out, because there are a lot of situations out there where we do have to negotiate every single day. And negotiation doesn't just have to be about money. So if you really think about it, you probably negotiate with your spouse every day and your kids, and money probably doesn't even enter into the picture, although it might if you're bribing them. I don't know. But there are so many instances as a creative where you may find yourself having to negotiate. And it's something that a lot of us, I think, don't feel particularly comfortable with. I think in North America, it's not something that is part of our culture in the same way that it is in other countries. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we even feel a little insulted if somebody tries to negotiate with us on, say, the price of our services. Yes. But the reality is, learning some very basic negotiation techniques and tips can really help improve not just your financial situation, but your whole work-life balance situation. And so we're going to be talking about ways that you, as an artist, as a creative, as a maker, can get more comfortable with negotiation. And before we dive in, one of the things that Heather mentioned when we were talking just a few moments ago before we started recording is that the whole concept of a successful negotiation is that both parties walk away feeling like they got what they wanted. So it's not about winning or losing. It's about making it so that everybody is happy.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That's exactly it. Episode done. Yeah, exactly. And to me, and it's something you and I just talked about earlier, Melissa, is that there's so much negotiation in everything. And funny enough, I negotiate with myself on a daily basis.
Oh my gosh, yes. I never even thought of that.
How do you manage your day? And there's projects that I love doing, and there's projects that I hate doing. For instance, the books. But I negotiate with myself. If I do this, then I'm going to do this. And you lay things out for yourself so that you feel like you're winning in your day and accomplished. But all of those things that you don't want to do still get done, right?
Yeah,
it's not
your
like
bookkeeper's still happy or your
Exactly.
accountant is still happy, and you
Exactly.
Yeah. That is a very good point. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this episode with Heather is because Heather is really good at negotiating, but she never makes it feel like, that classic buying a car scenario where you go in and it just feels icky. It just feels like, it's gross. You never really walk away when you've bought a car and feel like you got the best deal.
No, exactly.
You feel like you got the deal they wanted you to get.
Yeah, and I always approach, and I'm sure when my husband and my parents listen to this episode, they will nod viciously and like almost hate that I know this about myself. But in my opinion, everything's up for negotiation. Even if the answer is no, I still see that as an opportunity to maybe yes. And because I approach everything that way, I think I listen more. And that, I think, is the very first in any negotiation, is to listen, because you want to help solve a person's problem, whether you're Are you pitching on a project? Are you trying to solve something for yourself? You're trying to solve dilemmas. This is why you're walking into the situation. And so you need to understand what the dilemmas are, what the solutions could be provided. How can I help make this situation better? It's asking a lot of questions. It's doing research. It's understanding more what the situation looks like before you even walk into it to quote, start that negotiation. Because to me, it starts a lot sooner than the actual sit down to negotiate it. This is something that should be an ongoing process for you in terms of figuring out how can I deliver great results and have the person on the other end say, yes, this is exactly what I wanted as well. Right. And it's, yeah.
Yes, exactly. I think there's so many different situations where you may find an opportunity to negotiate. And some of the more obvious ones revolve around money. So you might be thinking within your own art business or your own creative business. It is a Monday today. I'm really just having trouble with my words. Within your own creative business, is that it's all about the finances. So it could be things like somebody commissions something from you. Mm-hmm. You could negotiate the fees on that. You could be doing sponsor content on your website with a brand or on your social media. There's an opportunity to negotiate there. It could be signing the lease on a studio or signing a book contract where you're negotiating your royalties versus your advance. Yep. Those are all places where creatives may have to negotiate, but there's so many other places where you might want to negotiate. And I think some of the things we're going to talk about will be really helpful to kind of get you to think. And as Heather said, it starts with listening. Like it really does. And it really starts with, I think one of the reasons why buying a car when you're negotiating that way feels so awkward is most of us are walking into a situation buying something we don't really understand. Like we know a car gets us from A to B, but we don't know, like if you lift the hood of my car, I can point out the main things.
I can tell you where windshield wiper fluid goes. That is it.
Exactly. So when, the salesperson is talking to you about, there's that Seinfeld episode where he's negotiating car repairs and he's talking about, you need a new Johnson rod. Like, what's a Johnson rod?
Johnson rod. Yes, and that's exactly it. But if you spent more time with your mechanic, or if you were an avid, but it's the listening and it's the understanding of, I agree with you completely. And I also think too, the negotiation, and this is where a lot of particularly creatives, artists, bloggers, they forget that there's a lot that can be grouped in, right? Mm-hmm. And so my first step is listening for sure in negotiation, but my key for any negotiation is what's on your no-no list. Like, what are your boundaries? What are you absolutely not willing to accept, right?
Yes.
And I think it's a lot easier to list off what goes on the no-no list than it is to list off what you do want, right?
Yes.
And so having that list of no-nos, having that list of things that I absolutely am not willing to sacrifice, whether that's money, time, exposure, whatever that is, and it can be as many things as you want, make sure you have that down, because when you walk into the conversation, when you're listening and you're asking questions, to come to a happy resolution that everybody feels like they got the great part of it, you have to know confidently within yourself. I would rather you sit there and ponder the opportunities of a good idea than sit there and ponder, is this something I'm comfortable with? In my mind, the what you're uncomfortable with, you should know that cold before you walk into the meeting, so that there are very definitive, you can steer that conversation very quickly around what you're willing to do as opposed to what you're not willing to do.
Yes, because I think one of the things that trips a lot of people up when they're negotiating is getting caught off guard. And that can happen so quickly in a meeting, or think about it again when you're buying a car. It's a very high pressure situation because they want you to walk out the door with that car today. Yep. Right? So you never feel like you can step away and say, I need a moment to think about this, or,
Mhm.
let me think about this. I'm going to go home and we can talk again in a few days. So that's why when you go into, say, a meeting or a discussion or a conversation with a new client, if you know what your non-negotiables are, then you're already one step ahead because you know what you're going to say no to. Everything else
Yes,
can be up for grabs, and you can take time to think about things. You don't have to say yes or no in that conversation. I think that's another mistake people make, is
I
that
agree with you
yes, it is
completely.
it is
Yes.
100% acceptable to say, this has been a really good conversation. There's
Mhm.
lots of things here to think about. I need to go back and I need to, you can say, I need to think about it myself, or I need to talk
Yep.
to my team, or I need to discuss it with my partner or whoever, to
Yep.
just give yourself a few more hours or a few more days, and then come back the next day or the next week and say, I'm happy with this, or this piece is not something that doesn't make me very comfortable. Can we take a look at that again? Like, you don't have to feel pressured into something. You can always just say, whoa, put the brakes on. I need to think about this.
Absolutely. And I think there's absolutely no shame, no harm. And in fact, I very much respect when I'm having conversations with people and they say, we've had, just as you said, we've had really great discussion. This is really interesting. Do you mind if I go home and think this over? I really appreciate that somebody is saying to me that they want to give this important thing time and reflection,
Yes.
because that says that they value the process,
Yeah, it
as
means
opposed
they're
as
invested.
exactly, they're invested in this process, as opposed to somebody, this isn't, you're not, in the Caribbean, haggling in a market for like something, right?
Yeah.
This isn't a haggling situation, this is a negotiation. And I think a negotiation requires thought, insight, and time. And sometimes that time is taken in the advance process. You have a whole series of conversations that really lead up to the culmination point of sitting in the room and saying yes, no, yes, no. But all the maybe so's have been eliminated in the days prior, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when you've done your thinking. Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of people feel like that's a failure on their part, of saying, I need to think about that. But I would prefer somebody saying, I need to think about that, than saying yes to something.
Or no.
And,
Or
or
giving you a
no,
flat out no.
exactly, exactly. And coming back to me later and saying, you know what, I said yes to this, but I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
because I
you don't
really,
want to be in a position where you say yes
yeah.
and then realize, I can't do this. Like, that's a
Hmm.
horrible situation to be in, where you have to go back to a client or somebody and say, I'm really sorry, I can't do this. It just makes you look unprofessional.
Absolutely. And it's funny. It's not to say that it's not to say that if you haven't done something before, you can't be honest with the person. And I just, funny enough, had this with a recent client where I said to them, I have never done that before, what you're asking, but man, I would love to try.
Yes.
And whoa, perfect, great. And so the conversation was able to move forward. So I demonstrated my enthusiasm. I was able to communicate that I had never done it before. So I was very clear, very transparent. This is something I've never done before, right? But I'm willing to try. Are you willing to let me try? And the answer was yes, which is great. And that, I think, is super important for anybody to recognize, that there's an opportunity to, yeah, you just need to be honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just need to be honest. And I think that starts with being honest with yourself, in terms of that no list, right? Being honest with
Yes.
yourself, what you're willing to deliver, and then being honest with whomever you're having the conversation with around expectations, deliverables, things like that.
And I think also being honest with yourself when your gut tells you there's some red flags happening. Like,
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
I think that's something a lot of us are not very good at. Like, I think it's actually very rare to
Mm,
not see the red flags. Like, we have all seen red flags that we
yes.
have chosen to ignore
Yes.
because you really wanted the gig, or you really wanted to work with that client, or you really needed the money, or there's so many reasons why you ignore those red flags. But that is, in a way, a form of dishonesty with yourself. You're kind of just brushing aside your gut reaction and saying, I'll figure it out later. So,
To-
yes, being
Totally.
honest with yourself when you go into a negotiation is very important. Being honest with yourself and
Yes.
with whoever you're negotiating with.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll say, just on the point of red flags, there's still some negotiation you can do with yourself on,
Mhm.
okay, I recognize that I got this red flag. I still want to move forward with this project. What was the red flag, and can I mitigate against that? So, have I heard that these people don't pay on time? Aha. So maybe I make my contract pay, you have to pay half in advance
Yes.
and the other half at the end. And so you could change the terms of what it is that how you normally do business, right? To help alleviate some of those red flags, or at least make yourself feel better that if in the end you don't say to yourself, I'm really kicking myself for doing this because I didn't get paid, I didn't get this, da 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 da. Well, if you knew that potentially that was coming, there's an opportunity to course correct it before, right? Like, how can you
Yeah.
protect yourself? And I think that's recognizing that in yourself, being honest, and then making that part of that no list, right? So the no list with this client is, I am not going to accept checks 30 days after the contract's over. I'm going to take the money now, right? Yeah.
And right there, you're negotiating, and that is exactly what negotiating is. In that instance, you're negotiating kind of with yourself, but essentially,
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing is you are adjusting the terms of how you would normally work in order to take on a project and have it still be successful. And
Yes,
that's essentially
exactly.
what you're doing when you're negotiating is you are taking a look at what you want, what the client or whoever you're talking to wants, and you're trying to figure out what pieces on your end you can adjust to
Mm-hmm.
make it better for the person you're negotiating with while still making it acceptable and enjoyable and comfortable for you.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
So, and I think this is one of the things where people kind of get a little caught up in is those things that you are negotiating don't all have to be around money. So
Mm-mm.
this episode kind of ties in quite nicely with the pricing episodes we did back in episode 14 and 15, I believe. So
Yes,
if you're
yes.
if you're somebody who's struggling with the whole pricing situation, you might want to go back and listen to those two episodes. But negotiation doesn't have to be about the price all the time.
In fact, I would say the price should be the least on the list of, like, there's so many more things to in fact negotiate, and that's where I think
Yes.
especially a lot of artists and creatives fall short, is there's so much more that can get looped in. And is it, and I know it's funny, actually, I'm sure you've seen it, it's a meme floating around Instagram right now, but and it's a check made out to dear influencer, 100 likes, like as if we can pay our rent with likes or exposure. But that's part of the negotiation. And so maybe they can't give you more money, but maybe they can give you 3 more mentions on their Instagram grid. Maybe they have a magazine partner who could also get you exposure. And so maybe that short $1,000, so your contract goes from $5,000 to $4,000, but maybe that $1,000 is made up in exposure elsewhere. And that's something that you need to think about negotiating into your contract. Is all the exposure? Is it time of work? Is it output? Maybe you're delivering less for that less money, right? And so
Yeah.
it's not about doing the same amount of work for less money. It's about doing a different project,
Yes,
right?
this is
And
something
so,
so many people miss is that if you're working with a client and like you said the budget was 5 your budget in your head is 5,000 for what they've asked and their budget for what they've asked is 4,000, you can still take the project, but instead of giving them 3 Instagram photos, you give them
yeah,
2, and instead of giving them a 1-minute video, you give them a 30-second video, or you give them one shout out on your social media. All those things are things that you can pull back on. With it could be
yes,
a design client, and instead of giving them your usual standard 3 revisions on a logo design, you're giving them 2. Like
exactly. And I think of it funny enough as you were talking, Melissa, and it's so weird that I'm thinking this way because science was so not my strong point, but I'm thinking of this like little visual of this little floating amoeba that's like this weird shape that gets bigger and smaller and the shapes of it change, but it's the project, right? And
Mm-hmm.
negotiation, all the things, so your money, your exposure, your all of the bits, all the moving bits that are in that you're negotiating are in that little amoeba, and it moves in shapes, and where you end up is a result of the entire conversation about all the things in that little moving shape, not about everything in isolation. And I think
Yes.
that's where a lot of people fall short, is that they negotiate, okay, we're going to negotiate the price, and then we're going to negotiate the Instagram exposure, and we're going to negotiate this. No, it's a collective. That's what you're negotiating, is the entire project. And that's what the fee is associated with, so that you have the opportunity to shift that project, and the person who you're negotiating with has the opportunity to shift that project. And I find, funny enough, and I would say you would agree with this and tell me if I'm wrong, is that in the process of negotiating and having actually really meaningful conversations around what the project could look like, quite often there's like light bulb moments where you go, oh
Mm.
my God, or we could do this, right?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
you're actually critically thinking about the entire project and looking at how can we unbox this together as partners, as opposed to, I want 5 grand, sit,
Yes.
fold arms, right? Like,
Another way to think about it is think about when you hear in the news like the government is negotiating teacher contracts or nursing contracts or
mm,
these big collective agreements, and they take months to negotiate. And the reason they take months is because they're doing exactly what you just said. They are negotiating every little piece of that
yeah,
agreement. And quite often you'll hear the parties come back and say, we're not arguing on the salary right now. Like that, we're
yeah,
fine with how much they're offering us as our wage. We're discussing things like holiday pay and sick leave benefits and all these other little pieces of the project. And that's how you have to kind of think about it when you're negotiating. It's not just the price, it's all the other little pieces. It all kind of comes
pieces.
together.
And I think one of the things, especially influencers, and this is what a lot of people who are maybe not used to negotiating for themselves, they've been in a corporate environment, is they're comparing themselves to others. So this person got this much money for doing this,
Mm-hmm.
but they're a different person. That's a different business. They're running
Yes.
a different, and they might negotiate better than you. Right.
Yeah.
And so, just as we talked about last time, that hard lesson, when I was told very clearly, Heather, that was a failure to negotiate on your part. Well, perfect. Lesson learned. And so, if you hear, for instance, that another blogger got more money for a project, don't rail at the other blogger or the brand that they're working with. That's a failure on your part to negotiate. Um, but it's
100%.
right, and it's not necessarily, maybe you did deserve less money because you actually did less work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would never walk into a negotiation saying, I'm looking at A as an example, because you're B, right? You're apples and they are oranges. You need to walk into it with a no list for yourself, and the values and the money and all of the things that are important to you and your business, and not base those decisions on what other people have done, say you should get done. I mean, really, other than your accountant who might say, you can't do this project, like this is a loss leader, right? Other than maybe a financial person really dictating that. And hopefully, as a small business owner, you can say that of your own business. But you can't compare yourself to others, especially walking into a negotiation. You really have to listen for yourself and negotiate for yourself and your small business, as opposed to saying, I want what they got.
Yes. I think one of the things about when you hear what another person got paid for a similar project, it is nice in that it gives you a guideline
Yeah.
as to what kind of potential budget might be available, those kinds of things. But again, like you said, the whole failure to negotiate, so many people don't realize that if you don't ask for something, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to get it.
Yes.
Whoever you're working with, whether it's a landlord, whether it's a client, they have an idea in their head of what they want to get financially out of this. And
Mm-hmm.
and even not even financially, but on all the other deliverables. And if you don't challenge that, and challenge is kind of a forceful word, so it's not a word I like to use in this situation, but for lack of a better word right now, if you don't challenge that, or if you don't just ask the question, they're not going to volunteer it. But
Absolutely.
if you just say to them something like, you know, this is a little bit below our normal rate for this. Is there any wiggle room in the budget? Or,
Exactly.
you know what, I would love to do this way for you, but what about if we did it this way, knowing that the other way is a little more advantageous to your situation. Like, it's just a matter of asking the question. The worst that can happen, and you hear this all the time, and it really is the worst that can happen, is they say no.
Yeah.
But it also comes down to how you ask.
Yes.
So,
And you and I had talked about this earlier when we were talking about negotiation as a topic, which is pitching and negotiation a lot of times go hand in hand. And I part of the negotiation is that pitch process and really framing yourself up. And it's the word choices, right? So just as you said, like challenging isn't it's an aggressive word, but
yes.
it's still kind of the right word, because
Yes.
you need to challenge the project and say, well, gosh, that's a little lower than the budget that we normally work with for this type of project, but I'm very excited to do this. I would love to work with you. Let me sit down with my team and figure out how we can make this work.
Yes.
Right? That's very positive thinking. It's future orientated. You're really expressing clear interest in the project. And so when you sit down with yourself, you know, your dog, your team, whoever it is, and make that list of saying, okay, well, they've gone down in budget. Could we do this? Could we do that? Could we do one less in-person meeting, which is then less transit time, less time in the car, less, you know, that's 2 less hours of my time. Could we make this work? Yes, I think we could. Because it's not a set, like, especially as artists, entrepreneurs, we are not retail stores, right? You don't walk into a retail store and say, I'll give you 20. Like, you do, the price is the price, really. And
You know what, though, as somebody who ran a retail store,
I know people
you'd
try
be
to.
surprised.
I know. But the price is the price, right? And there's a
Yes.
sticker on it. Whereas, you know, a lot of freelancers, I mean, I don't even have a website for my freelance business, but I don't have my rates on there because every client discussion is an opportunity to have that conversation.
Yes.
And it's not, nothing is fixed.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's like big life statement. Nothing is fixed, right? And so there's the opportunity to question everything in the right way, right? In
Yeah.
a positive, future orientated, solutions orientated. Am I even saying orientated right?
Is it
Anyway, you know what I
orientated
mean.
or oriented? I
Oriented?
don't know.
Anyway,
Both sound weird.
I know. Anyway, future direction, but it's if you want to think positively about it and communicate that, right? As opposed to no is such an ugly word. That's why I don't like no. That's why I see everything as an opportunity to make it a yes maybe. But yeah, I agree with you completely.
Yeah, I really do feel like negotiation is like 85% your attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, if you go, if somebody comes to you and asks you to do something for less than you would normally do it, I see so many people who get up in arms,
Yeah.
offended right off the bat. They're all like firing off an email to that person saying, just
Mm-hmm.
chewing their ear off. This is a big insult. I can't believe you would offer this. Blah blah blah. Don't do that. Just
No.
do not do that. It is one of the worst things you can do for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You might be very successful right now, and you might be in a situation where your services can command a very good rate,
Mm-hmm.
but situations change, and you never want to be remembered as that person who was a real jerk when somebody
Yeah.
just asked a question.
And I'll say categorically, I mean, and I'm sure you've seen it, but I do blogger programs as you do for lots of different companies.
Mhm.
I have, quote, a no-no list of people literally They do great work. It has absolutely, and I will be very clear about this, it has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of work that they deliver for me or my clients.
They're just
It's
unpleasant.
absolutely, they are unpleasant. I did not enjoy the email exchanges, the phone conversations, or for instance, in some cases, like I don't like seeing an email that I sent you in confidence, copied and pasted in a Facebook forum
Yes.
when
Yeah.
you didn't even give me the opportunity to course correct. And this, the pitch process, the negotiation process, it is a key ingredient in relationship building. And that relationship, if you're starting out a new client relationship, you have an existing, I have clients who I have worked with for all 6 years of being freelance. And every single time we enter into a new project, there's conversation. I don't even want to call it negotiation. There's conversation around deliverables and the rate that I will get paid for those deliverables.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an ongoing part of a ongoing client relationship. And if I did not approach that conversation, the negotiation in typical Heather fashion, positive, upbeat, forward thinking, solutions oriented, like if I wasn't on brand with Heather, right? I'm that client relationship is going to suffer, and I might not get the opportunity to work with them for another 6 years, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to treat that negotiation as an opportunity to move everything forward. And if only, so the answer might be no, you might not do it, but you have the opportunity to still move the relationship forward, so that the next time I think of you, I'm going to still come back to you, as opposed to saying you were a bit of a dick and I'm not, right?
Yep. 100. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so easy to do that. It's just really just changing your frame of reference and being a professional. Bashing somebody who has just asked you a question on
Yeah.
social media is not professional. Like,
No.
they just asked you a question, and maybe the question was, we have this program and we're offering you $100 to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, a laundry list of things. And that $100 is just not an appropriate ask for what they're asking you to do. You don't need to go out and shame them publicly.
No.
They asked a question. All you need to do is go back and say, thank you so much for your interest in working with me. Unfortunately, the compensation for this particular ask is not a good fit. Here's what we could do for $100.
Yes.
If that doesn't work for you, and if for any reason your budget amount should change, I would be more than happy to have another conversation with you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
even if you think that person is going to be a colossal waste of your time, and some of them are, you don't need to be unprofessional and unkind.
No. And I would also, I think too, what we are all navigating life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has days. And I think even in negotiation, and it's part of moving that relationship forward, is, and this happens, and I was that junior PR girl. A boss came to me, gave me a big long list of people. You need to email the following, copy and paste the following to all of these people. I'm just doing my job. I was not told to think about this, be critical about this, right? I'm just the 22-year-old PR girl who was told to copy and paste and send this out, right? And that's what I'm doing. And it's not my fault that I did the wrong thing, right? I mean, and so you have to have a little bit of grace in thinking to yourself, now, if you get an email from me that you don't like, have an honest conversation with me, right? But if it's a random PR person who you've never heard of before that, it's on a mailing list, don't rail out at that person. Look at that as an opportunity to continue that relationship with potentially that agency, right? And educate that person.
Yeah,
Right?
think of it this way. If you went out on a first date with somebody and you're sitting there at your table, you're having a great dinner, and your date treats the wait staff like garbage.
Mm-hmm.
They leave a crappy tip, they talk to them like they're not human, all those things, you'd be sitting there going, wow, this person's a jerk. We're not
Yeah.
going to have a second date, right? That essentially when you talk to that junior PR person who's just doing their job, they've been given
Yep.
this list, they got to go do what they got to do, and you reply back to them and say something like, I can't believe you would offer me this, or, you know, or you shame them on social media or anything, you're being that guy or that girl on that date who was crappy to the wait staff.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I mean, gosh, I was that young. I was that young PR girl. Now I
We
am in
all
charge of
have
picking.
been.
Exactly. We all have been. And yet our careers move forward, right? You switch agencies, you go to different places. And so you're not just burning a bridge with that young person at that agency. You're burning a bridge with that person anywhere they ever go.
Yes, and that is something people forget about, is that the worlds we live in, as far as the work we do, tend to be very small. So whether it's an agency person, agency people move around all the time. Like, and it could be that their next stop is with your absolute favorite client. And only when
It's
they walk into that stop, now they're a senior account manager and they're like,
Yep.
"Oh, Heather Travis. Yeah, we're not working with her anymore."
Exactly. And I have literally, Melissa, that's such a great example because I have literally been in that room. I have been that person who was treated poorly. And when they came to me in a new position at a new company and said, "Oh, we love working with this person," I said, here's the experience I had with that person. I would prefer not to work with them.
Yeah.
Off the list. And so you're burning bridges left, right, and center. It doesn't mean that you need to be all roses and sunshine with
No, you
everybody.
don't. You just need to be professional and kind.
Kind. Oh gosh, yes, exactly.
Kind is a
Professional and kind.
very underappreciated quality, but people who are kind are, it's not that hard to do it either. It's
No,
not that hard to be kind. And this isn't just the agency world, it could be the gallery world, it could
anything.
be the publishing world, it could be the
Yes.
music industry. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It's just,
No.
you know, if you say one kind word to that junior PR person who probably gets beat up every day by people,
Yes.
let's be honest.
Yep.
It's like that person folding t-shirts at the Gap, you know?
Yep.
Like,
I was
they're
also
just,
that person. Yes,
yes,
exactly.
they're expendable to most people that they have to deal with. And, all it takes is just a kind word from you, or just somebody who's polite and thoughtful. And that sticks with them because quite often it's really rare.
Yes,
So,
exactly. And I agree. And I think that's the kindness factor. I mean, I'm not that I want to summarize myself, but if I was to summarize all of my thoughts on negotiation, first off, everything is up for negotiation. If you walk into every opportunity actively listening for the opportunity to get more, do more, be more, that's a good thing, right? You need to
mhm.
listen to that, but you need to see every negotiation as an opportunity to move that relationship forward. Whether the project is moving forward or not, the relationship is moved forward.
Yes.
You have a deeper understanding for each other. You have a deeper understanding for project needs, budget capacities, timing of proposals, when you can get your work into this gallery or not into this gallery. You'll have a deeper understanding so that the next time you go into the negotiation with them, you have all of that knowledge that you can use to again move the needle forward, right?
Yes. And this is where a no doesn't mean you're not moving the relationship forward. No's
Exactly.
can be very informative. It could be, if somebody approaches you and the budget isn't the right fit at all.
Yes.
You can simply say to them, "I'm sorry, this budget just doesn't work for us. We can't make it work in this framework. But here's sort of the area. This is the budget range that we usually work in." Okay, you know what? Thank you for telling me. Noted. I mean, a
Exactly.
lot of times when we approach people when it comes to like a budget, we really have no idea if this budget's going to be appropriate for them or not. You're kind of like feeling things out. So sometimes
Yep.
it's just really nice to have somebody come out and say, "This isn't enough." Like, we're not saying no, we're not saying we can't ever work with you. We're just saying that, like, for what you're asking for, this isn't going to be a good fit.
Exactly.
That's a way that you're moving the relationship forward, because now
Hmm.
okay, for future projects, this is what we need to set aside to work with this person.
Yes.
And whether it's commissioning a large scale painting for your house, okay, this is what let's say Heather charges for, a 6 foot by 4 foot painting. Okay, now we can start saving up. Or let's say you've got your mindset on this wedding photographer that you really want to hire because you just absolutely love their work. And you go and you have the conversation with them and you find out what the minimum package is. And maybe you try to negotiate it down a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's still too much for your budget. Well, now you have the opportunity to either look somewhere else, or you can start planning for how you're going to save that money up. So it's still moving the relationship forward. And somebody once told me that no really just means no, not right now. It doesn't mean no forever.
That's exactly it.
So that's another good way to look at it, is it means no, not right now. Like, I get pitched all the time with story ideas, all the time, constantly. I get a horrendous number of really bad pitches. So, but I do get some people will come to me and they'll have a really great pitch, but it's just not a focus. It's just not a good fit for what we're focusing on this quarter or this half of the year. And I will simply say to them, you know what, this is not a good fit for where we're at right now, but feel free to get in touch in 6 months when things might look very different. And so when you hear that no, don't just think the door's been slammed in your face. Other editors might not be as, they might be more blunt than me and just say, no, this isn't a good fit. Okay. So you know what? You have the option there of coming back and saying, okay, I would really like to work for you. What are you looking for in the next 6 months to a year? Like, is there something that I could bring to the table that would be a good fit for you? What are your next 6 issues for the back half of the year going to focus on? Or do you have an editorial calendar that you share with the public? A lot of magazines and publications will have a public editorial calendar that you can look at. It's hidden, and you either have to do a lot of digging to find it, or you have to ask. But it's there, and quite often it will be shared with you if they think you're a legit writer who might have something to contribute. So, situations like that, just see what you can do to be a good fit, and then try again.
Yes, absolutely. And instead of, and funny enough, I mean, I know this blends a little bit with pitching, but those cold pitches that you're getting, if somebody sent you a note and said, I love you, your organization, this, whatever, do you have, I would love to work with you. Do you have any information you could share with me in advance, an editorial calendar, et cetera, et cetera? So research, build that knowledge base and start that relationship building, so that then when you get that information and you go back with your pitch to start the negotiation, hi, here's this, here's that. You said you were looking for this. Here's what I can offer. You're starting out at a more informed place, which is more likely to yield some sort of yes, but you're also that negotiation, you've already demonstrated a willingness to learn and that you care. And that is a big factor in the negotiation, because if I want to work with you, I want to work with somebody who's going to see the same things that I see, right?
Yeah, I want to work with somebody who's eager, who's enthusiastic, who's shown they've taken the time to learn a bit about what it is that we do. And so many of the pitches I get, and again, this is a little focused on pitching, but so many of the pitches I get are from people who obviously did not read our contribute page, which is right on our website and tells you exactly what we're looking for. And if you didn't bother to read that, I can't be bothered to really listen to what you have to say. Like, show me that you've done some of the work first. So that's a key part. And a lot of negotiation comes out of pitching. So if you are somebody who does pitch a lot, you really need to do, like Heather said, listen and do your research before you can you contact anybody. You need to at least show that you've done some of the work on your end, and I think that's the very first step you have to take before you do anything else in the negotiation process. Is your research and having those initial conversations where you try to find out a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And those investigative, I mean, I remember saying years ago, in terms of like, especially in agriculture, the budget years are totally different for every agricultural group. They get funding from whole hosts of different funding bodies. Some years it's, massive amounts of money. Some years it's nothing. And so really that relationship in in sitting down and saying, what does your funding year look like? What do your budget years look like? When do you fill out the forms to even get the money? And do you need my assistance in putting together ideas, right? And so maybe you're negotiating to negotiate.
Yes.
You're sitting down with that group and saying, hey, you submit funding proposals in September? Excellent. Maybe we could sit down in August and just brainstorm. And an hour of your time, you could brainstorm ideas, right, for them to submit funding proposals so that when they get the money, they're going to come back to you and say, oh, remember that awesome idea we were thinking of? Let's flush it out and
Yes.
see if we can do it. And you helped them get the money. That's a really big win in terms of a negotiation for them,
Yes.
but you helped them. And so if you can insert yourself into being a solutions provider, right?
Yes.
That is really impactful. And especially for small businesses, right? Small retail stores, independent businesses, family-owned businesses, the more you can make yourself an invaluable member of their team who's sitting on the outside, whether you're a blogger, influencer, recipe writer, photographer, whatever it is that you're doing, if you can offer solutions, you're going to continuously get opportunities to negotiate and move that relationship forward over and over and over again. And isn't that the goal, right?
You just said something there that is like bang on, and that is that you want to be part of that person's team. Even though you don't work, you're not an employee, you want to be viewed as part of the team. And that could go into so many different situations. It could be like, let's say you're negotiating the lease on a studio. Like, this is your big opportunity to move out of your basement into, your first art studio that's dedicated to you, right?
Yes.
And the lease is just a little bit more than you can afford. So think of the ways that you could maybe negotiate that lease down. Maybe it's something as simple as offering to do the landscaping, like mowing the lawn, tending to the flower beds around it, whatever the case may be. Yeah. Or maybe it is offering your landlord the opportunity to host some kind of event in the space once a month or once a quarter. Because you can make it look like they're in a really cool, funky gallery or something like that. Yes. I don't know. There's ways.
And maybe it's just offering a painting for their office waiting room, maybe. And there's, funny enough, that's such a great example, Melissa. I have a girlfriend who, she moved her small business into a really awesome downtown, in her small community. She moved into her downtown building and negotiated with the landlord. Instead of a chunk of the rent, she negotiated she would manage social media for the building and help attract more people. So sat down with this person. You seem to be having trouble getting more people to fill your spaces. I can help with that. Here's how I can help. Would that be of interest to you? Yes, it would be. Excellent. Can I get a break in my rent for that? You absolutely can, because you're bringing in more rent from other people.
Yes.
And so it's a solutions provider who now, what a great way to move that relationship forward.
Yeah, now you're partners. You both have a vested interest in this. You have a vested interest because your rent is I don't know, a few $100s less a month.
Yeah.
And they have a vested interest in you because you're helping them fill their building and keep their tenants happy because, they've got more people coming in to see all these different artists or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But that is the situation you want to be in, where you both have a vested interest in each other's success. Because
totally. And think of it this way. So now, instead of just having your office, just to continue this example, instead of just having a new studio space, you also now have a new client. And so you have a new studio space, and because you're doing social media for them, or you sold art to them, or your photography services, whatever it is that you're offering, that's now a client. Who cares if it came out of the barter and the negotiation of your contract? That has nothing. The terms of how that client came to be are nobody else's business but your own, but you now have a client. So now, instead of having 3 clients that you manage social media for, you have 4. That just instantly upped your game with the optics of any other person that you're walking in and starting, again, a negotiation with them. You can then say, I have 4 clients that I manage social media for.
And you have another client now who can potentially tell other people about the
Exactly.
work you do. So you have an
Exactly.
opportunity to grow even more out of this very simple negotiation that you really were doing because you just wanted $300 off your rent.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yes. And it's funny, especially with small business owners. I've done a lot of bartering. You have something that I want, I have something that you want. How can we just do an
Yeah.
exchange? And I think that's a great way to look at it because you're still providing solutions, you're still getting value out of it, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to deal with money, but you're still getting value out of it. And that's again, I mean, we're circling back to where we started, which is negotiation. In fact, the money is like the least important part of the negotiation. It's all the other things that are go around
Yeah.
it, including that relationship building. Like it's deepening your understanding of the groups and the organization and all of that.
One of the best lessons I have ever got in negotiation is being part of a team that runs large scale events. So when I worked in my corporate job, I was part of a team that ran a very large scale event every year. And then with my current business, we've run national conferences every year. And doing sponsorship negotiation has given me such an education in negotiation, because when you do sponsorships, that's when you realize the amount the company or whoever pays for the sponsorship is almost the least important. I mean, it is important because sponsorships are usually what makes sure an event can happen,
Yeah.
but you learn that everything is up for grabs. Putting on a large scale event of any kind is an extremely expensive proposition.
Yes.
And so if you have a sponsor, let's say your minimum sponsor to work with you is $1,000 to be a sponsor, and it goes up from there. If you have a sponsor come to you and say, we want to be, your gold tier sponsor, but we can't afford the gold tier rate, or we don't have the budget for that, but here's what we can give you instead. And when you're running an event like that, somebody who can pay for a speaker, pay the speaker's travel, pay the speaker's hotel and food and everything for 3 or 4 days, that's one expense I don't have to take care of.
Exactly. And that's they've it's a solution to your problem.
Yeah.
Your problem is, how do I have this speaker? How do I pay this person? They just solved that. So it's not about the money, it's the solution.
As an event host, every single thing we do is costing us a lot of money. Like everything. There are no freebies in the event world. And working with, big hotels or convention centers, like the costs are just astronomical.
Yeah.
So, if somebody can come along and say, you know what, how about if we take care of dinner for your entire audience on the Friday night? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
That in some cases could be $30,000 or $40,000 taken off your plate.
Yes, exactly. Which is a huge, and that's a huge thank you. And now, like, in addition to the cost, you no longer have to arrange that dinner. That all of the quote problems are being solved by them. You don't have to worry about, like, do we have tablecloths on the tables? When does the room get set up? When does the appetizers come out? That's not your problem anymore. They've just volunteered to be the solutions provider for all of that. And that is a very valuable partner.
It is, and they might come to you and say, you know what, we're going to take a very small sponsorship, so maybe it's the $1,000 sponsorship, but what if we put fresh fruit in every hotel room for your guests? Or what if we provided bottled water for the event? Or all those little niceties when you go to an event that just make it that much more fun, and things, those all cost a lot of money. It could be something as fun, like we did a popcorn station one year. Like it was super fun. It was super fun, and that was the sponsor took care of that, and that was a nice little extra that we got to offer that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So you start to really realize when you're doing these things, when you're doing an event like that, that's when I really learned, like, everything is up for negotiation, like quite literally. And there's a lot of really cool stuff that can come out of negotiating that has nothing to do with the money.
Yes. And I would say, if you were looking in terms of a word, instead of negotiation, it's partnership. And
Yes.
so you are walking in and saying, this is a partnership. What does this partnership look like? And that, I think, is a really positive way to think about negotiation, because we've said it multiple times, but it's moving the relationship forward. And if you think of it as a partnership, how can we partner to get everything that we collectively want as a team? And I think
Yeah.
that's a really nice way to think of it. And it's a nice way to approach it. And it also, especially as small business, you're not this massive company having a negotiation with, you're not Miramax Studios having a negotiation with Coca-Cola for
No.
product placement, right? Like this isn't, these are not that scale. This is an artist trying to form a partnership with a gallery. This is a freelancer forming a partnership with a new client. And so the negotiations, they're just such a small part of the relationship. And in fact, they should be just you should just be always negotiating, because you should always be listening, always be asking questions, always be trying to learn more about that client, to understand their business more, so that you can be a better partner to them and deliver better solutions. And that it's an ongoing process, right? Just because you learned how their company works when you started working for them 3 years ago doesn't mean that that's how the company works now.
I think that's a really good note to end on, actually, is just to think of it as a partnership and how you both can have a vested interest in
Yes.
making that partnership succeed. And
Succeed.
if you look at it from that perspective, negotiation almost gets taken out of it, because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, you are both just looking for ways to make this succeed for everyone and make everyone feel good. And negotiation just becomes this thing that you do almost without thinking about it,
Yes.
because you're just trying to make their life better and they're just trying to make your life better.
Yeah.
And, honestly, if we all approach things that way
I
these
know.
days,
Like life lessons,
the
exactly,
world would
right?
be a much better place right now.
Yeah, totally, eh? Ask, smile, be kind. Yes.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
it's not that difficult. So I just really encourage you all, the next time that you are starting on a new relationship with a client or anyone for that matter, is to, like Heather said, start with listening, start with doing your research, start with thinking of ways that you can help. Be a helper.
Yes. Be a helper. Exactly. Be a
And
helper.
check your attitude when you go into these situations. When you go in with a positive attitude where you show that you want to help somebody who might have been having a really cranky morning, you can turn their morning around just by going in and being that positive, kind person who wants to make things better for them.
Yeah.
And that is a great way to start off on the right foot.
Absolutely. You need to be a ray of sunshine all the time. I honestly that's that's my modus operandi, is really just to be like, yeah, and I think that takes you far in anything, and in particular negotiation. And that, I think, um not to dwell on it too long, but you and I have talked about it. One of my very good strengths is negotiation,
Yes.
and yet I'm a ray of sunshine. And so
And you're very helpful. Like,
and so if you approach it, you don't have to be a bitch, right? You don't have to be aggressive. It's about knowing your worth, understanding your value, and really approaching it exactly as you said. You're walking into this partnership and thinking about solutions to move that partnership and the relationship forward. And it's not about the dollars. The dollars will come, and that's part of the conversation. Absolutely it is, but I think negotiation is so much broader than the money.
yeah, absolutely. And even if that project is not for you at this point in time,
Hmm.
it is perfectly okay to say no, but
Yes.
do it in a way that is kind, professional, and leaves the door open to work together later, because you
Yeah.
never know how
Yeah.
circumstances, both yours and theirs, are going to change. So, again, if you are respectful, kind, and professional, that no is not going to be a painful no. It's just going to be a no. Whereas if you're not so kind or professional or respectful, that no is going to be a solid no forever.
Forever, exactly. And in fact, you've ruined the relationship, right?
Yeah.
It's the partnership, and it's not. And I even think, just think of a negotiation with your spouse. Well, if I go do this, will you be able to do the dishes after? Yes, I will. As opposed to, I'm never doing the dishes ever again.
Yeah.
Oh, well, hello then. Like, okay, wow, we were just having and so that's, not that you need to treat your clients like your spouse, but really you have to, I want to live, quote, live with my clients for a long time.
Yeah.
I want to be on their team for a long time. And so the only way to do that is to approach it in that way, not thinking about getting what I want. It's thinking about getting what the team needs to succeed. And if the team has what it needs to succeed, that means that I'm getting what I need to succeed.
Bingo. All right, everybody. I think this was a great episode, actually. And I hope this has given you all some food for thought and just to think about how you're going to handle your next discussion with a potential client, a potential collaborator, a potential landlord. And just realize that there's no harm in asking. Be kind. Be calm, as Dr. Bonnie Henry says. If you live in Canada, you probably know who she is. What is it? Be kind, be calm, and be safe.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and keep fit and have fun.
That's right. So this was great. Thank you, Heather. We will be back next week with episode number 24. And if you enjoyed this episode, we would really love it if you could head over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Those help other people find us, which is really helpful to even more creatives. And so until next week, everyone, thanks very much, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshелookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshелookedup.com or come say hi on Instagram at andshелookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.